Omerta, Code of Silence. The incident that immortalized Omerta began in 1973 when a low-ranking Sicilian mafioso named Leonardo Vitale walked into a Palermo police station and confessed to murders, extortion, and the structure of Cosa Nostra. Police dismissed him as insane. But a decade later, when he was murdered after release, it became clear that he had violated the oldest and deadliest mafia commandment, the law of silence. Omerta is the cornerstone of mafia culture, a pact of silence so sacred that breaking it is worse than killing a brother. It forbids cooperation with authorities, even when one's life is in danger, and demands that all disputes be settled within the family. Its roots lie in southern Italy's centuries of foreign oppression, when peasants learned to distrust the state and handle justice privately. In Sicily's lawless hills, Omerta became survival, the belief that he who is deaf, blind, and silent will live 100 years in peace. By the time Cosa Nostra crystallized in the 19th century, silence had become weaponized. The wounded man's vow, "If I live, I'll kill you. If I die, I forgive you," captured its essence. Self-reliance, vengeance, and pride. It was passed on through blood oaths and burned saints' images during initiation, making betrayal a mortal sin punishable by death for the member and possibly his family. The rule crossed the Atlantic with Sicilian immigrants, defining La Cosa Nostra in America, where it shielded bootlegging empires during Prohibition. That armor cracked only in 1963, when Joseph Valachi testified before the U.S. Senate, publicly admitting the Mafia's existence. Later, Tommaso Buscetta's 1984 testimony in Italy detonated the same taboo, leading to the Maxi trials that convicted hundreds. Even today, silence is both mythology and mechanism, romanticized in films like The Godfather, yet deadly in practice. Modern informants live under protection, but in Sicily, Omerta still echoes through narrow alleys, a whispered reminder that loyalty, once broken, is paid for in blood. No documentation of activities. The Mafia's second sacred code is deceptively practical. Never write anything down. In 1969, Palermo boss Michele Cavataio broke this rule by mapping out every family's territory and paid with his life in the Viale Lazio massacre. His killers tore through his pockets searching for the map that could expose them. The origin of this rule lies in the 19th century, when early mafiosi learned that paper trails led to prison. Police raids occasionally unearthed ledgers or letters, allowing authorities to piece together networks. So the Mafia outlawed all documentation. No membership lists, no financial records, no notes about killings or meetings. Every order would be spoken, remembered, and denied. Even in Salvatore Lo Piccolo's 10 Commandments, discovered in 2007, the irony stands, the written list itself violated its own rule, yet included mandates built around it. Speak only the truth to superiors. Never write, never forget. In practice, this rule shaped the Mafia's entire communication system. Members used coded language like Pizzini, small notes destroyed after reading, to relay messages between fugitives like Bernardo Provenzano and his lieutenants. The absence of paper forced reliance on memory, metaphor, and trust. It made infiltration nearly impossible and created a culture where even casual handwriting was suspect. When the Mafia migrated to America, the rule followed. During Prohibition, bosses like Lucky Luciano and Al Capone ran empires entirely on oral agreements. But the 1957 Appalachian meeting, where police found guest lists and notes, proved how fatal documentation could be. Dozens of bosses were arrested, their network exposed by scraps of paper. To this day, no code illustrates the Mafia's paranoia better. Without written records, law enforcement depended on turncoats like Tommaso Buscetta, whose spoken memories became the modern history of Cosa Nostra. Within the underworld, writing equals weakness, proof that silence, even in ink, can be deadly. Truthfulness to superiors. In the Mafia, lies kill faster than bullets. The code demanding truthfulness to superiors ensures that every soldier speaks honestly to his boss, even if the truth incriminates him. Deception corrodes the chain of command, and in a world without written contracts, truth becomes currency. This rule originated in 19th century Sicily, where Cosa Nostra functioned like a shadow court system. Leaders needed accurate reports to manage feuds, money, and revenge. A single lie could spark bloodshed. During the first Mafia war of the 1960s, misinformation about drug profits fueled the Tsiakuli massacre, where a car bomb killed 7 police officers and forced a government crackdown. Truthfulness, unlike Omerta, governs internal relations. Members must tell the truth upward, even while lying to outsiders. The contradiction defines Mafia psychology: silence toward the state, confession to the family. The rule's gravity appears in sit-downs, internal tribunals where members are interrogated. A dishonest answer can mark a man for death. Tommaso Buscetta described these rituals as courts of honor, where bosses like Salvatore Salvatore Riina demanded candor to maintain discipline. The 2007 Lo Piccolo commandments even warned that recruits with fathers killed in vendettas can't join. They might lie to avenge blood. In America, truth to superiors became gospel during the Prohibition years. When Joe Valachi lied to his boss about drug dealings, suspicion alone nearly got him killed, a lesson that later inspired his Senate confession. John Gotti, decades later, enforced the same rule through fear, executing anyone suspected of deceit. To lie to a superior is to betray the Brotherhood's foundation. It is an act of treason without paperwork, punished not with trials but with silence, a gun, and a grave. Availability to the organization. Imagine this. Your wife is in labor and your phone rings. The boss wants you now. You go. No hesitation, no excuses, because availability is not optional in the Mafia, it is survival. The rule demanding total readiness defines the Mafia's military-like discipline. It requires that members be constantly available to the family, no matter the time, weather, or personal cost. Written in Lo Piccolo's 10 Commandments, it orders mafiosi to appear when summoned, even during births or funerals. Disobedience means death. The origin of this code lies in the Mafia's 19th century role as Sicily's private police. When landowners or peasants called for protection, mafiosi had to act immediately to maintain authority. Hesitation implied weakness. That ethos hardened during the Second Mafia War of the 1980s, when bosses like Salvatore Riina demanded instant obedience. Hits such as the assassination of General Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa were organized and executed within days, proving that the system's power lay in its speed. For members, it's more than rule, it's identity. The initiation ritual's blood oath binds them to Cosa Nostra as their true family. Antonino Calderone, a former boss turned informer, described leaving his wife in childbirth to attend a meeting, terrified that missing it would mark him as unfaithful. In the American Mafia, this rule adapted to industrial rhythms. Lucky Luciano and John Gotti both demanded immediate attendance at meetings, regardless of circumstance. FBI wiretaps from the 1980s captured soldiers being berated for family excuses. Refusal to answer the call meant exile or execution. Availability, like oxygen, is invisible but vital. It keeps the organization breathing, synchronizing hundreds of lives into one obedient heartbeat, a machine that moves only when commanded. No stealing from Mafia families. When money disappears within the Mafia, it's not theft, it's treason. The rule forbidding members from stealing from other families or associates preserves the fragile trust that holds the underworld together. The origin of this commandment goes back to Sicily's 19th century clans, where alliances were the difference between wealth and bloodshed. To steal from a fellow mafioso risked collapsing entire networks of extortion and land management. By the early 20th century, stealing internally became punishable by death, codified in what would later be called the 10 Commandments of Cosa Nostra. Violations are rare because punishment is absolute. During the Second Mafia War, Riina's Corleonesi faction executed dozens accused of pocketing drug profits. One of them, Stefano Bontade, a respected boss, was murdered in 1981 after being accused of diverting heroin money. Pentiti like Tommaso Buscetta testified that stealing from the organization was like stealing from God. In America, the same rule structured prohibition profits. Giuseppe Morello and later Lucky Luciano used arbitration through the commission to handle accusations of skimming, but greed repeatedly ignited wars, from the 1931 Castellamarese War to John Gotti's executions of subordinates in the 1990s for withholding construction kickbacks. Stealing from the Mafia is more than financial betrayal. It's ideological heresy. The organization sees itself as a collective that robs outsiders, never its own. Violating that code poisons the bloodstream, and like infection, it's cured only by cutting the limb off completely. Punctuality and respect for appointments. In the Mafia, being late can kill you. The code demanding punctuality and absolute respect for appointments transforms timekeeping into loyalty. To arrive late is to insult your superior, to suggest that his command does not control your clock. This rule's roots stretch to the rural Sicilian clans of the 19th century, where isolated geography made timing critical. Missed meetings could expose hideouts or trigger accidental firefights. As Cosa Nostra urbanized, punctuality became ritualized respect. By 2007, when police seized Lo Piccolo's 10 Commandments, appointments must absolutely be respected, appeared in writing, proof that tardiness had been fatal too often to ignore. The Mafia's wars are full of clocks. In the first Mafia War of the 1960s, delayed arrivals doomed victims in ambushes like the Viale Lazio massacre. During the Corleonesi era, punctuality became an obsession. Pentito Antonino Giuffre recalled how being a few minutes late to a commission meeting marked a man for execution. In America, the same principle governed meetings of the five families. Paul Castellano scolded underlings for lateness, equating it with disrespect. Ironically, Eventually, his own punctuality cost him. He arrived on time to his 1985 meeting at Sparks Steakhouse, where John Gotti's gunmen were waiting. Punctuality in the Mafia isn't etiquette, it's survival. The man who shows up early proves allegiance. The man who arrives late proves fear, and fear in this world always dies first. Vendetta, personal revenge. In the Mafia, revenge is not emotion, it's law. The Code of Vendetta, which mandates personal retaliation for every wrong, has defined Sicilian honor for centuries. In 1963, that law erupted violently during the Ciaculli massacre, when a car bomb intended for one clan killed 7 officers instead. The explosion was vengeance gone astray, and it dragged all of Sicily into chaos. Vendetta originated long before the Mafia itself, rooted in the blood feuds, fade, of southern Italy's medieval past. In isolated villages without trust in the state, justice was personal. If you are wronged, went the belief, you must right it with your own hands. When Cosa Nostra emerged in the 19th century, it inherited and institutionalized that instinct. Under Mafia law, to let an offense go unpunished was to lose face, inviting further exploitation. Revenge became not passion, but duty. Yet vendetta inside the Mafia was never chaotic. It was codified. Revenge had to be sanctioned by superiors to avoid larger wars. During the First Mafia War, suspicion that the Greco family had cheated on a heroin deal led Angelo La Barbera to retaliate with bombings that spiraled out of control. Later in the 1980s, Salvatore Rina's Corleonesi faction used vendetta as strategy, framing murders as honor killings to mask political assassinations, including those of judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo E. Borsellino. When Sicilian customs crossed the Atlantic, vendetta followed. The Castellamarese War of 1931, 60 deaths in less than 2 years, was a vendetta between rival Sicilian clans transplanted to New York. Even John Gotti's hit on Paul Castellano in 1985 echoed the same principle, revenge disguised as justice. Vendetta sustains the illusion of moral order in an immoral world. It gives meaning to violence, ritual to murder, and identity to killers who believe that vengeance equals virtue. But it is also the Mafia's curse, a cycle that consumes generations until there is nothing left to avenge but ashes. No relations with police. Few commandments are as absolute as the Mafia's ban on relations with police. It forbids not only collaboration or bribery without permission, but even family connections. No sons, brothers, or in-laws of law enforcement officers can join. The message is stark. The state is the enemy, and proximity to it is poison. This code took shape in 19th century Sicily, when the Mafia arose in defiance of foreign rulers, and later the unified Italian state. To the Sicilian underworld, police were oppressors, outsiders enforcing corrupt justice. Ethnographer Giuseppe Pitre recorded that mafiosi avoided contact with lawmen as one avoids leprosy. By the early 20th century, this rule hardened under Mussolini's prefect Cesare Mori, who hunted thousands of mafiosi. Families suspected of harboring police ties were executed or exiled. In modern Cosa Nostra, the rule appears explicitly in the 10 Commandments, barring association with police even in social or religious settings. Gaspare Mutolo, a one-time hitman turned informant, recalled that when his brother joined the Carabinieri, he was immediately demoted and watched. Violations often meant death. During Riina's 1980s purges, suspected informants or relatives of officers vanished without a trace. In America, the rule adapted to a landscape swarming with federal agencies. From Prohibition to the Riso era, recruits were screened for any police relatives. Cooperation with law enforcement meant execution, the fate awaiting anyone suspected of talking. Henry Hill's defection after the Lufthansa heist became the ultimate betrayal, shattering decades of silence and proving how fragile the rule had become under pressure. Still, the ethos survives. The Mafia is its own nation, and the police its foreign enemy. Any relationship between them, blood or friendship, contaminates the family. To the old guard, the only good cop was a dead one, the only safe mafioso, one who died before ever shaking a badge-bearing hand. Respect wives and families. Among the Mafia's most personal commandments is the order to respect wives and families, an ironic moral shield around men who murder for profit. It forbids even looking at another member's wife and demands that mafiosi treat their own with dignity. In Salvatore Lo Piccolo's 10 Commandments, it reads plainly, "Never look at the wives of friends." The code's roots reach deep into Sicily's patriarchal honor culture. In a society where a man's reputation was bound to his household, a wife's virtue reflected his strength. Early Cosci enforced this rule to prevent jealousies that could fracture alliances or ignite vendettas. Adultery inside the ranks wasn't just immoral, it was destabilizing. Enforcement was merciless. In the 1980s, Salvatore Rina's Corleonesi faction used accusations of disrespect toward wives as pretexts for executions, cloaking political murders in moral outrage. Antonino Calderone, in his testimony, described trials where men were beaten or killed for mere rumors of flirtation. The irony was grotesque. Mafiosi were forbidden from looking at their comrades' wives, but encouraged to maintain mistresses, the infamous gumas, outside the circle. In the American Mafia, this rule governed behavior as tightly as omertà. Joseph Valachi testified that messing with a maidman's wife was punishable by death. Cases like Angelo Bruno's assassination in 1980 or Louis de Bono's 1990 execution mixed whispers of infidelity with power struggles, showing how personal sin became organizational strategy. The rule's hypocrisy mirrors the Mafia's self-image, brutal yet bound by honor. Women are revered as symbols but silenced as people. To respect wives means to protect them from outsiders and from truth, keeping them safe in ignorance. Within that silence, the Mafia sustains its cruelest illusion: that family, even in crime, is sacred. Moral behavior requirement. The Mafia's moral behavior rule is a paradox, a criminal organization demanding virtue among killers. It forbids anyone of bad morals from joining and punishes members who exhibit vice: adulterers, drunkards, gamblers, addicts, or those with two-timing relatives. This moral theater sustains the illusion that the Mafia is not evil, merely honorable. Historically, the rule comes from the Yao, Mafia's need to preserve discipline within secrecy. In 19th century Sicily, bandits sought legitimacy by posing as guardians of justice, punishing theft and protecting women while extorting everyone else. By the 20th century, those codes hardened into moral screening. Giuseppe Pitre noted that recruits were vetted for family reputation. A man's bloodline had to be clean of scandal. In practice, it meant that anyone with an immoral background could not be trusted. Pentiti, like Tommaso Buscetta, revealed that even an adulterous relative could disqualify a candidate. During the 1960s and 1980s, immoral behavior became justification for purges. Bosses like Rina killed subordinates for gambling debts or drug use, branding them unfit. The irony, of course, is staggering. Men who trafficked heroin and ordered massacres saw themselves as defenders of morality. In America, the rule served the same purpose: to maintain credibility. Lucky Luciano's 1936 conviction for prostitution embarrassed the syndicate, proving the danger of violating the no pimping, no scandal code. John Gotti later enforced the same principle, executing associates who brought bad attention through personal vices. The moral code endures because it protects hypocrisy. It allows the Mafia to imagine itself as righteous within its own universe, disciplined, loyal, and principled, even while standing on a mountain of blood. Avoid bars, clubs, and drugs. To a mafioso, nightlife is death. The commandment, "Don't go to pubs and clubs," forbids members from frequenting public social spaces or using drugs, not from prudishness but survival. A single loose word in a bar could destroy an empire. This rule traces back to Sicily's village origins, where taverns teemed with informants and gossip. Bosses banned members from drinking in public to prevent leaks. By the early 1900s, Antonio Cutrera's police reports described mafiosi who avoided alcohol entirely, priding themselves on sober vigilance. Later, Lo Piccolo's 10 Commandments codified the ban, linking nightlife to betrayal and exposure. Inside Cosa Nostra, sobriety became a mark of discipline. Tommaso Buscetta testified that members addicted to drugs were executed, not for moral reasons, but because addicts talk. During the heroin boom of the 1970s, Rina's Corleonesi faction killed its own couriers for using the product they sold. The rule ensured operational silence in a world built on whispers. In America, this principle was tested by the temptations of prohibition. While the Mafia sold liquor to the public, members were forbidden to get drunk. Al Capone's excesses were tolerated because of power, not principle, while ordinary soldiers faced demotion for bar hopping. By the 1980s, as cocaine invaded New York, John Gotti's crew punished users with death. The irony is total. The Mafia built fortunes on vice but forbade its members from indulging. The bars they owned were traps for others, never for themselves. Sobriety wasn't morality, it was strategy, ensuring that no one ever confessed under the influence. No exploiting prostitution. This rule forbids members from exploiting prostitution, a curious morality in an empire built on extortion. This ban separates men of honor from street pimps, claiming dignity even in crime. The principle originated in 19th century Sicily, when mafiosi portrayed themselves as protectors of women and community morality. While they taxed brothels through protection payments, they considered direct involvement dishonorable. Early criminologists like Cesare Lombroso observed that mafiosi punished pimps as cowards who live off women. By the mid-20th century, bosses like Calogero Vizzini enforced the ban to curry favor with Catholic allies who tolerated racketeering but abhorred open vice. Yet, hypocrisy thrived. In practice, mafia families often profited indirectly through extortion. When Lucky Luciano was convicted in 1936 for compulsory prostitution, his defense argued that he had violated mafia ethics by getting too close to the trade, a rare case where the underworld agreed with the court. In both Sicily and America, those caught running brothels faced expulsion or death, not for immorality, but for attracting attention. The ban reflects the mafia's obsession with image. It allows killers to imagine themselves as chivalrous, guardians of family virtue, while selling drugs and trafficking guns. In modern groups like the 'Ndrangheta, the rule still stands, even as they tax prostitution rings run by outsiders. The business continues, but honor demands plausible deniability. To the mafia, pimping is not beneath them because it's evil. It's beneath them because it's sloppy. Control must always look noble, even when it isn't. Dress and act like a gentleman. In the mafia, appearance is armor. The code to dress and act like a gentleman is not about vanity, it's about invisibility. A well-dressed man can walk past the police, dine with politicians, and negotiate millions in crime without raising suspicion. To look like a gentleman is to look harmless. This tradition dates back to 19th century Sicily, when mafia leaders like Vito Cascioferro adopted bourgeois style to separate themselves from the bandits they secretly commanded. Reports from ethnographer Giuseppe Pitre noted that men of honor wore clean suits and polished shoes to symbolize dignity and authority, even as they ran extortion rackets. The gentleman's code extended beyond clothes. It meant composure, politeness, and control. A mafioso who lost his temper or spoke crudely risked being seen as unfit for leadership. By the 20th century, this performance became ritual. Luciano Leggio and later Salvatore Riina demanded that members show discipline in demeanor as much as in violence. Tommaso Buscetta, in his testimonies, described how even during drug negotiations, bosses maintained impeccable manners and never raised their voices, proof of power through restraint. In the Second Mafia War, perceived disrespect in speech or appearance could justify execution. When Cosa Nostra crossed the Atlantic, style became myth. Lucky Luciano's pinstripe suits and John Gotti's silk ties redefined the gangster aesthetic, elegance as intimidation. Wiretaps from Gotti's era captured him berating underlings for sloppy dress, declaring that appearance is respect. The dapper Don persona projected wealth, discipline, and dominance, turning fashion into propaganda. In both Sicily and America, dressing like a gentleman wasn't about status, it was about deception. The suit concealed the criminal, the smile masked the killer, and the polished shoe left no trace in the blood it stepped through. Third-party introductions. In the Mafia, nobody meets by accident. The rule of third-party introductions requires that two members can never speak directly without being formally introduced by a trusted intermediary. This code exists to prevent infiltration, protect hierarchy, and ensure that every relationship within Cosa Nostra begins with verified loyalty. The custom emerged in Sicily's rural strongholds, where secrecy meant survival. Early clans operated through layered anonymity. Only a superior could vouch for a subordinate. Giuseppe Pitre's 1880s observations describe a society where no man trusts another without a man in between. This social firewall became an institutional safeguard as the mafia evolved into a network of invisible connections. When Cosa Nostra expanded to America, the rule became gospel. During the Prohibition era, bosses like Lucky Luciano used intermediaries for every introduction, creating a system where no outsider could infiltrate without exposure. Breaking this rule was tantamount to inviting the enemy inside. The 1957 Appalachian meeting, for example, was compromised when informal introductions led to loose security, resulting in dozens of arrests. Inside the organization, introductions are ceremonial. The sponsor vouches with his reputation, saying he is a friend of ours, signaling membership. Without that phrase, even a genuine mafioso might be treated as an enemy. FBI informants like Joseph Valachi explained how failing to follow this protocol could lead to immediate suspicion or death. The logic is simple. If you can't be trusted to know who you're speaking to, you can't be trusted to live. Third-party introductions turn secrecy into structure, a closed circuit where every handshake is witnessed by an unseen hand. Initiation ritual. Becoming a mafioso isn't just recruitment, it's rebirth. The initiation ritual marks a man's transformation from outsider to man of honor, binding him to Cosa Nostra with blood, fire, and fear. The ritual's origins reach back to rural Sicily in the 19th century, when the Mafia operated as secret brotherhoods of enforcers. Initiation ceremonies modeled on Catholic rites turned crime into religion. According to historical accounts and Pentito testimonies, the ceremony begins with a pinprick to the finger. A saint's image is placed in the initiate's palm and set aflame. As it burns, he swears, "May my flesh burn like this saint if I betray my brothers." In Sicily, this oath wasn't symbolic. It was binding for life. Once initiated, a man no longer belonged to himself but to the organization. Death was the only exit. Tommaso Buscetta's confessions during the Maxi trials detailed how recruits were blindfolded, surrounded by armed men, and sworn to secrecy under threat of execution. This ritual sealed omertà, the unbreakable silence. In America, the ceremony adapted to new surroundings but retained its intensity. FBI recordings from the 1980s induction of the Bonanno family captured the same rite, nearly unchanged from Sicily's hills. Recruits pledged loyalty over a burning saint card, while bosses like Joseph Massino intoned ancient words of allegiance. The initiation ritual survives because it gives structure to fear. It transforms obedience into faith, turning criminals into believers and betrayal into heresy. Vetting new members. Before the oath comes the test. The code of vetting new members ensures that only the worthy, or at least the silent, enter Cosa Nostra. Each candidate's life is dissected: family history, reputation, temperament, and loyalties. This process originated in Sicily's tight-knit communities, where everyone knew everyone's lineage. Membership required more than courage. It required a clean record within Mafia moral logic. No police relatives, no immoral kin, no history of betrayal. Early ethnographers like Pitre and police records from the 1890s San Giorgi report document that background checks could stretch generations. By the mid-20th century, this vetting became formalized. Tommaso Buscetta revealed that names of prospective members were circulated among senior bosses for approval, ensuring that no one with unresolved vendettas or bad blood could join. If a relative had cheated, snitched, or even quarreled with a made man, the candidate was rejected. Guilt by bloodline. In America, the rule took on bureaucratic precision. During the commission era, each of the 5 families required unanimous consent before induction. Prospects were observed for years, sometimes decades, to test loyalty and discretion. A single careless word, a boast, or a drunken slip could end their candidacy or their life. Vetting keeps the Mafia pure by its own twisted definition. It filters out the impulsive and the weak, creating a brotherhood bound not by friendship but by shared secrecy. The irony: those most qualified to enter are the ones who've already learned to lie perfectly to everyone else. Protocol of equality with respect. Despite its rigid hierarchy, the Mafia enforces a paradoxical rule: treat all made men with equality and respect. Whether boss or soldier, every initiated member is a man of honor, deserving deference in speech and conduct. The purpose is balance, preventing pride from igniting wars. This protocol took shape in Sicily's early Mafia meetings, where rival families negotiated under an honor code resembling chivalry. Even enemies observed formality. Insults were rare, and disputes were settled through sit-downs mediated by neutral bosses. As the organization evolved, this rule became essential to prevent constant bloodshed in a society obsessed with status. Respect was currency. A careless word could cost a life. During the 1960s First Mafia War, rumors of disrespect between clans escalated into the Ciaculli massacre. In the 1980s, Salvatore Riina manipulated the language of respect to justify slaughtering rivals, claiming they had failed to show proper regard. Pentiti like Antonino Giuffre described how even minor gestures, like smoking before a superior or using informal tones, could trigger fatal retribution. In America, the rule served the same stabilizing function. Meetings of the 5 families operated with near-diplomatic etiquette. Joe Valachi's Senate testimony revealed that seating orders, greetings, and tone of voice were carefully choreographed to avoid perceived slights. Even powerful bosses used phrases like "with respect" before making threats. The protocol isn't about kindness, it's control. By enforcing equality and formality, Mafia hides its cruelty beneath civility. Respect keeps the peace until it doesn't, and when it breaks, the blood always follows. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.